Now, whenever I hear somebody talking about how the hell did Donald Trump become president in 2016, I usually reference his false populism. What do you mean by that, you're probably asking? He sold himself. Donald Trump sold himself as the anti-establishment, for the people kind of person. He was like the Republican Bernie Sanders, if you will. And I always told people he's going to flip-flop. He is a sleazy businessman. And sure enough, as soon as he became president, I was right. He flip-flopped right away. He hired military generals, Republican establishment figures, an Exxon Mobil member, and sorry, as an Exxon Mobil CEO and a Goldman Sachs CEO to be in his cabinet. Now, here is a classic moment from one of the Republican debates, the primary debates about 10 months ago, so almost a year ago. Marco Rubio calls out Donald Trump. Now, the Republican debates were pretty cool because Donald Trump would absolutely bitch slap the other candidates, and then every once in a while, one of them would grow the balls to call out somebody. So you had Marco Rubio with the Polish illegal workers, which he's going to point out in a second. You had Chris Christie pointing out Marco Rubio just repeating, scripted lines, and then at one point you had Donald Trump who pointed out how Jeb Bush shouldn't be president because his brother, 9/11 happened under his brother, George W. Bush. So here is a really, really good moment from the Republican primaries.
I'm going to claim that you're the only one that lifted this into the campaign, that you acknowledge that, for example, you're the only person on the stage that's ever been fined for hiring people to work on your projects illegally. You hired some workers from Poland.
No, I'm the only one on the stage that's hired people. You haven't hired anybody.
In fact, some of the people he hired... Well, but hold on.
I've hired tens of thousands of people over my job. You've hired
1,000 people
You've
from
had
another
nothing
company,
but problems
from another
with your
country.
credit cards, etc.
Let me say, let me finish the statement. This is important.
You haven't hired one
He
person
hired
in your life.
workers from Poland, and he had to pay $1 million or so in a judgment.
That's wrong.
That's a fact.
Totally wrong.
Well, people can look it up. I'm sure people are Googling it right now. Look it up. Trump Polish workers. You'll see $1 million for hiring illegal workers on one of his projects. Yeah, he did.
So, as you just heard, Donald Trump quickly diverted to, well, I'm the only person who has hired people. First off, that's irrelevant how many people you hired. Who cares if you hired people and nobody else hired people? We're talking about you hiring illegals, and when you say you hired tens of thousands of people, how many of those were actually legal workers? And for the record, I'm pretty sure more people on the stage actually hired people. I'm pretty sure with over a dozen candidates, some of them hired campaign workers and stuff like that, so that's a ridiculous claim. So, let's get into the Polish workers and stuff like that. Oh my god, my hair is ridiculous. Oh, whatever. Who cares? Anyways, so 35 years ago, whenever the original Trump Tower was being created, Donald Trump had the area which he wanted to build the tower, and next door, he knew that there were illegal Polish workers who were working on the area next to where he wanted to build the Trump Tower. So, according to the leader of the Polish illegal workers, who was put on trial, or they did an interview, or they talked to him, and according to other sources this is true, Trump walked over, so he walked over from where he wanted to build Trump Tower to next door and talked to the Polish illegal workers, and apparently he had said, those Polish guys are good hard workers. Pretty true statement, I would imagine. Polish people are famous for their great combat skills and working skills. Pretty hardy people. So, apparently, he hired them, right? And they didn't have proper working conditions. They weren't allowed to sleep for long times. They also didn't have proper safety equipment. So they were forced to work for long hours without any sleep and had no proper safety equipment. He basically hired illegal workers and abused them. Isn't one of Trump's main things that he is against illegals taking American jobs? Why didn't you hire American workers to build the tower, your tower then? Why did you have to hire these illegal Polish workers and abuse them with no sleep and no proper safety equipment, right? He says he's going to build a wall and make sure the Mexicans stop taking jobs. These Polish people just took some jobs that could have went to Americans. So there's some hypocrisy, and of course he abused them. I can't believe he would not let them sleep or give them proper safety equipment. That's, even for Trump, that's kind of low. I wouldn't expect him to do something like that. And that's not even the worst part. At the end of the day, the workers were either promised or they were expecting at least $100,000, which back in the 80s or 35 years ago, that was probably a lot more money than it is nowadays. So that's actually more money than $100,000 nowadays. And he didn't refuse to pay them. And when they got frustrated, he threatened to contact the Immigration and Naturalization Service. So he was threatening to deport them, like, okay, we're going to hire you with jobs that could have went to Americans, we're going to abuse you, and then you're just going to do that for free, or I'm not going to pay you, otherwise I'll deport your ass. Come on, Trump, even for you, that's kind of slimy. Now, what's another one of Trump's things? He doesn't like to outsource jobs, yet his ties are made in China, and I believe it was Taiwan? Unless there's either 2 or 3 countries where his ties are made. So, of course, he claims to be against the rich Chinese businessmen, how they're raping the economy in America and all that stuff, yet he makes deals with them all the time. I remember at one point, he what did he say? He wanted to mimic a Chinese businessman, so he was like, they don't even negotiate, they just walk in and say, we want deal. That's crazy, right? So, the past Trump towers were built with Chinese steel, because of course Trump makes these deals with the Chinese businessmen, and he actually buys cheap Chinese metal, whether it be Chinese steel or Chinese aluminum, and he builds the towers out of cheap Chinese steel. So he always talks about how the Chinese are taking American jobs. Why isn't he buying the steel from American steel workers? Why does he have to buy it from Chinese businessmen for cheap? And of course, he's not a good businessman. And another thing, during that debate, he points out how Marco Rubio has credit card problems. Trump, you are an economic failure, or economic failure. Believe me, big league. He is a failure, man. He's gone bankrupt like 8 times. He's never made a good deal in his life. He just scams people. That's all he does. So, of course, builds the tower out of using Polish illegal workers, buys cheap Chinese metal, and he makes deals with the Mafia. Yes, that is true. So, apparently way back in the day, way back in the day, actually, another thing that the Polish illegal workers apparently did was they cleared off the site for the tower to be built. Not just building the tower, come on, that's way too easy for them. Is that Donald Trump actually did deals with companies that were owned by the Mafia, and I can't remember these names, so I have them here. Fat Tony Salerno and Paul Castellano, my bad. So Paul Castellano and Fat Tony Salerno, probably pronouncing those wrong. So he did deals with the Mafia. He's supposed to be against criminals, yet here he is. Apparently he had bought cheap or overpriced cement off of the Mafia. So again, he wants to save a few pennies because he's not a good businessman by any standards. He does not have the art of the deal mastered, so he has to buy cheap Polish workers, cheap Chinese metal, aluminum and steel, and he has to buy cheap cement from companies owned by the Mafia when he's against criminals, from these big Mafia bosses, right? That is ridiculous. And not only that, but back to the previous point, he didn't just buy metal from the Chinese, he also hired some illegal Chinese workers. So illegal Polish people and illegal Chinese people, when he's against all illegals, he's against crime and outsourcing, yet he outsources and does deals with a criminal organization. Now, say what you will about the Mafia, some people may like it, some people may dislike it. I'm pretty mixed, but nonetheless it is pretty unprofessional from Trump to do. So this is the guy who is the next president of the United States of America in 2016. It's going to be pretty interesting to see what goes on. Just wanted to point out these 3 pieces of information. Hopefully you learned something new. This has been Riley Flynn Wookie Cookie. I'll catch you guys next time.